What I've got for you here is a pierced relief of a yellow flag iris. It's one of my favourite flowers. It's stylised in that I'm not trying to be botanically correct. It's a wood carving, and thus I've simplified things, I've made bigger shapes and so on, you know, to make it a carving that I think works. It is pierced relief in that all this is missing, and the frame and all the elements are part of the same piece of wood that I started with. And it's a big piece of wood, as you can see. You could make this smaller, and you would find if you do that, that some of these elements actually become quite fiddly and quite delicate. But certainly it would work smaller, and it would work as a relief carving where you leave the background present. So I would say that this is a lot of work. It's a big carving, and although the techniques aren't different from other carvings on this site, because of the size, it takes a long time, and it's quite precise, you know, getting the frame correct and so on. So I would call this a fairly advanced carving. It's also interesting in that it uses the grain of the wood, I think, quite well. So what we're seeing here are elements that are tied, thin elements, you know, there's my little finger, they're not much, and they're tied to various parts so that the strength is there with the grain, even though we're taking away the background. Anyway, there it is. We'll get through it as normal, step by step, starting at the beginning with my idea. Let's go. This is where it all started. This is a carving, one of the first carvings I ever did about 45 years ago on a piece of wood that I had. It's not easy to see here, but let me just blow it up a little bit with this photocopy. So it's a yellow flag iris, and I do remember sitting by a pond and actually sketching one. And what I liked about it when I pulled it out of the box was that I liked the sort of space. It's definitely a stylized look. It's not a real iris, a yellow flag iris growing in a pond. We've got a water line here, which I thought was nice. We've got some leaves, and you can see how it cuts the frame, so it goes right back and so on. So I like this carving very much, and I thought, well, here I am many years later, what would it be like if I did a modern version, an up-to-date version of this? And although this is a relief carving, here's the wood here in the background, I thought it would be very good, very challenging to make this a pierced relief. In other words, straight through in the background like that. A totally different problem with the design. But that's what I was going to do. I want to keep that stylized look, but just make the whole thing bigger and something a bit more, hopefully better carved than I did when I did this one. Anyway, so where did I go from here? And I want to show you this sort of path that I took. Well, the first thing, of course, is I had to go back to irises. So online, taking lots of pictures of downloads of irises, so I understood how this iris worked. Now, I'm not going to do a real iris. It's very complicated. It's probably better done in another medium. Stylizing means it's going to look like a wood carving. But you see, I went through these different pictures, and from these pictures I would take a tracing like so. So I've got a tracing, and then looking at that I'm thinking, how can I alter that to what I liked? And so from here I went more to this one, more like this, which is a bit more similar to what I've got here. So I'm bearing that one in mind. So there's one, you know, another little one here. And then from tracing, which I like tracing paper, I went on to do lots of thumbnail sketches. Look, you know, there's one here. And then scribbling little sketches as to how that might work in the actual carving. How would it work in terms of the whole piece? So this is just a couple, but I did loads and loads of these things, and eventually I ended up with this. Okay, this was carving number one, or thought number one. I've got this is all pierced. All the green is pierced. So I've got my two big flowers. I've got lots of space, but everything is held against something else. Do you see in the design? And I've got these reeds coming up here like that, and there will be no top edge. That'll be completely free like that. And So looking at that, I thought, well, okay, let's build that up to the sort of size I'd like. So I got my scanner on my printer, which is brilliant. And for example, you take this little part here. With my scanner, I can enlarge it, you know, cut the picture up and enlarge it to bigger pieces like this. Right, so a whole series of cut out pieces like from this one went to make this big picture here. So I think you can see that there. So that now is a bigger version of my drawing. So this is a sort of size I have in mind. So of course the next thing to do is I'm thinking, oh well, this is a long thinnish piece of wood. I'm sure I've got wood like that. So off I went to find the wood, and lo and behold, the best piece of wood I had, without having to join them up, was this one. Here it is. This is a totally different proportion. So now I've got to take my drawing, which I spent while doing, and adapt it to this beautiful piece of wood. So let me look at how I did that. This is my piece of wood, and this is my first drawing, and you can see how much distance, not so much the height, but there's a lot of width to be made up. Now I like these shapes. I really did like what I'd got here. I like the whole idea. It just needed to be sort of pulled around and made bigger. So what I did is I cut a version of this up into little bits like this, and these pieces I could enlarge again on the photocopier. So again with the photocopier, and here I go, I started assembling at different heights. So I've tried this at different sizes, different works, different parts, and I can cut these up and move these around until I got that looking more or less where I thought I'd like them. So that's really where the photocopier comes into its own, because you can do different sizes, different enlargements, smaller, different for different parts, and start assembling it. So that's just a scanner photocopier on my printer, which is so useful. Anyway, from that I needed some more accurate drawing, because you can see this is all quite loose here from the enlargement. So from that I did my first tracing. Right, so this was my first real effort. Now the thing is that what I'm looking for, and I think it's really important in this designing, is that the grain is going in this direction. There's no strength here because all this is missing. So I have to run the strength, like this pencil, if you imagine that's where the strength is, I have to connect one thing to another in a way. I can't just leave them empty. Well, perhaps a little bit like this, because the grain's going in this direction. But I couldn't do this, because then that would be very weak. And you can see how dirty this is. That's because I've been drawing my lines, erasing them, drawing them, erasing them over and over again until I get this pretty much where I want. And having done that, I still wasn't comfortable about these rigid reeds. And I also didn't have a frame, and I was beginning to think that a frame might be a good idea. And also I still wanted a water level of some sort of idea of a water level. So onwards I went, and I took out the reeds and I did another big tracing. So that one will go there. Okay, and then from there I started thinking, well, what if it was, if there's a space here, what if it tilted like this? And you can see these creases here and these lines, and I've tried this at different angles. What if this was, so I'm moving my drawings around, because once I get into the wood, of course I can't change it. So that was another option I was looking at. And eventually I came up with the right balance, I thought, and this is now my final working drawing. I put a bit of white paper behind the tracing here so that you can see it better, Just one thing about tracing paper, by the way, what is really good about it is, of course, if you wanted to do a pair of these, you can flip it over. So without any more effort, you can double up. Anyway, so there's my working drawing in place. What I like about it still is the fullness of these petals, which I thought were really great, contrasting with these straight bits. This is all space, so there's lots of big areas of space. There's a general feeling that I can feel sort of lines going this way here and sort of lines going this way. So there's a nice sort of balancing thing going on, I think, here. So I like the design. We've got everything tied to everything else. So there'll be a frame here, and I'm not sure this frame's right. I might make this a bit bigger, but whatever, this strength, if you imagine a pencil is where the strength is, you know, in the fibres of this wood, coming up here is going to be touching this top and therefore be tied, what we call tied. So this leaf here is tied to this stem, this point is tied to this stem, and so on. Here and here. I'm not quite sure what's here. I don't know whether I'll really go in. Remember, this is a drawing, not a three-dimensional carving. This will be full, this will be back, and so on. So there's my drawing. Happy with that, happy with the orientation. Not sure about the outside quite yet. But the next stage then is to get this drawing onto the wood. Here's my wood. This is lime wood. You can see the rings at the end of the tree, a nice wide piece. It's slightly warped. You can see it moving here like this, but that's all right. It's a freestanding thing. It's not part of furniture. It doesn't really matter, a little bit like that. These are the rings of the tree. And so what this means is if the rings are like that, then it'll warp if it's going to warp in the opposite direction. Okay, so this would warp like this way, down to the wall at each end. So this will be our surface. If I put it this way round, if there's any warping, this will lift up and you'll be able to see the edge of the frame. There'll be a gap there. So it shouldn't happen because this is a stable piece of wood, but it's always good an idea to orientate it that way so that you're warping against the wall here. Now if you don't have this thickness of wood, this width of wood, and I'm very lucky to have this, then you need to glue this up, assuming you want to do it this size. And what you mustn't do, the first thing you mustn't do is get two pieces of wood and glue it down the middle, because that's really noticeable. Far better to have a couple of joints at either side and nothing in the middle. So don't put one down the middle, split one if you have to, don't even have to be the same size, but separate them out. The other thing you need to do is, excuse the scribble here, this is my board of wood that I'm joining up. Here are my joins, like this. If the rings are going in this direction, then you have to alternate them in the other direction. So the rings going this way, do you see, like this. What that means is that the wood would warp across, if it's going to warp, like this, and therefore remains sort of flat, everything's compensating. That's really how you do a tabletop. This is really a bit of general woodwork anyway. So think about your wood, think about how you might join it. Now if I go over to this side here, this end rather, you can see this. I've got a crack here. In fact, I've got several little cracks here, down here, from the middle of the tree, and I think that's obviously the end, more of the end of the board, original board. But that is a problem. Where do I put that to be really safe? Well, in my drawing, I know that I have a thick end where the water is going to be, so I would definitely put it there and not the other end. So I've got it out of the way. So this is going to be the way our board is up, like this. So I know now that this is the bottom end, and my drawing will fit on it like so. So look at the wood, check its orientation and all that, and then you can line up the drawing ready to put it onto the wood. I've positioned the drawing on the wood with a couple of bits of masking tape to make sure that it doesn't move. Before I did that, I went over the far side with this 5B very soft pencil over the lines. It's really old school, low tech sort of way of doing it. I could stick the wood on, the paper onto the wood, but actually, since I'm going to be scoring in this outline, I think that would get in the way. So this is a quick way of doing it anyway. So that is on there. That's rubbed at the back. I just make sure that that doesn't move, and then I will get a ballpoint, a biro, and I'm going to go over those lines like so, just pressing in. Now I'm going to press in hard enough so that if they don't show, then I can see the indentation. So I'm going to go round like this, all those lines as accurately as I can. And let's just see. Yeah, there you can see that coming really clearly. And then I would go round the whole line again with my ballpoint onto the wood, very carefully, and just fill that in, make sure that's nice and clean. So I'm going to go around the whole of this tracing now and put those lines onto the wood. Here's the drawing now on the wood. Happy with that. You can see that I've drawn in the frame. Well, I've actually scored it in with a marking gauge, and I've made it a bit heftier than my drawing, and I've made this part at the top a little bit wider than the bits at the side, and this part at the bottom the heaviest, and this is really the water part, if you like. So how I did that was I drew first in pencil where I thought these frames would be, set up my marking gauge, and then push it across like this. You put your thumb behind here and you rotate it down like this till it's scoring, and then it's pushing into the wood, making your score, and then you stop at this corner here. Now it's quite important that you don't go on and score into the frame itself, so make sure you stop very carefully there, as near as you can, and then you can get your pencil and you can put it in that groove and you can just run it along like that, and then that will give you a nice strong line to work to. And you can see that I've gone over the petals. That doesn't matter, we're going to carve those. So that will be one side, and then of course you need to do it on the other side too, because we've got to cut from the front and the back to get this frame accurate. So there you go, that's now the drawing and the frame marked on the wood, and we're ready to start taking away this waste wood here and piercing through.